Donald Trump promised to bring steel jobs roaring back to America. He stood in front of shuttered mills, hard hat perched on his head, and told the American worker, "Steel is back." Fast forward to 2025, and the reality is anything but a comeback. Instead, the U.S. steel industry is in chaos. Prices are soaring, factories are closing, and the very jobs Trump vowed to save are evaporating before our eyes. Why? Because protectionist policies, spearheaded by the White House, have triggered a cascading crisis across the industrial heartland. And now, in a stunning turn, Ford has moved its entire production line for light trucks and EVs to Canada, bypassing U.S. tariffs entirely. That's right, Canada, once treated as an afterthought in Trump's America First strategy, is now eating America's lunch.
If you're done watching corrupt elites rig the system and leave you behind, subscribe now. If you want real talk, raw truth, and zero spin, this is your channel. If you're ready to fight back, hit that subscribe button and stand with us.
Canada strikes back with precision. Let's be clear, Canada didn't pick this fight, but it sure as hell finished it with surgical precision. After repeated U.S. tariff hikes on steel and aluminum, some reaching 35%, Ottawa responded not with chest beating, but with a cold, calculated strategy. They restricted the export of specialty steel products to the U.S., redirected supply contracts to European and Asian buyers, and introduced a new requirement that all strategic materials exported from Canada must be certified for friendly market alignment. Translation: no more easy access for an unpredictable trade partner. Trump's reaction? Pure fury. But by the time he slammed his fist on the Resolute desk, it was too late. Ford's exit is just the beginning. Ford's announcement sent shockwaves through the U.S. auto industry. After a year of trying to navigate volatile steel prices and erratic tariffs, the company had enough. They shuttered final assembly operations in Michigan and Indiana and shifted production to Ontario, citing predictable input costs and stable supply networks. This isn't just a corporate strategy shift. It's an industrial earthquake. Ford's move affects 3,800 U.S. assembly jobs, over 6,000 logistics and warehouse workers, thousands more in the supplier ecosystem from Ohio to Kentucky. Meanwhile, Windsor and Oakville are booming. The very regions Trump mocked for being too dependent on U.S. goodwill are now driving a new era of North American manufacturing. Without the U.S. at the center, small manufacturers, collateral damage. While corporate giants adapt, small and mid-sized manufacturers across the Midwest are facing ruin. These companies can't afford to reroute supply chains or build new factories in Canada. They're stuck, paying double for steel, triple for insurance, and drowning in compliance paperwork created by the tariff war. In places like Gary, Indiana, and Youngstown, Ohio, machine shops are laying off workers, scaling back shifts, or closing altogether. A small auto parts supplier in Toledo put it bluntly: "We used to buy American steel. Now we can't afford it. Asia's cheaper, but the shipping is slow and risky. We're running out of options." Trump's tariff war backfires. Again, let's talk about what tariffs are supposed to do. They're meant to protect domestic industries, to give local producers a leg up against cheap foreign imports. But Trump's steel tariffs? They've done the exact opposite. Prices are up 58% since 2023. Production is down across U.S. steel mills. Imports from Brazil, India, and Turkey have surged. U.S. construction and manufacturing costs are skyrocketing. In trying to wall off the U.S. economy, Trump created a fortress without food. The supply lines are broken, and no amount of nationalistic bluster can rebuild what's been lost to strategic failure. Canada and Brazil fill the void. As U.S. steel becomes too expensive and unreliable, other countries are stepping in. Brazil has expanded its production capacity and signed fast-track trade deals with the EU and Southeast Asia. India is quietly becoming a major supplier of rebar, sheet steel, and specialty alloys to nations once reliant on North American producers. And Canada, with its reliable environmental standards and strong labor protections, is becoming the go-to source for high-grade steel in industries like automotive and aerospace. Trump claimed tariffs would restore American dominance in steel. Instead, they've shattered the myth of U.S. centrality in the global supply chain. Investors are spooked, and they should be. Markets don't run on ideology. They run on certainty. And right now, the only thing certain about U.S. trade policy is chaos. The International Monetary Fund has issued repeated warnings. Global investors are fleeing U.S. steel, U.S. manufacturing, and even U.S. debt markets, citing the unpredictable risk landscape created by executive-level volatility. In other words, Trump's tantrums are driving money and jobs away from American soil. Psychological collapse in the heartland. The economic consequences of the tariff war are devastating, but the psychological impact may be worse. In cities like Flint, Decatur, and Erie, workers are losing faith, not just in jobs, but in the very idea of a stable industrial future. Truckers are being laid off as cross-border logistics shrink. Warehouse managers report massive slowdowns in freight volume. Entire communities are bracing for what one union leader called a second NAFTA, but this time without a recovery plan. Trump's defenders insist the pain is worth it. But for Americans watching their paychecks disappear, the pain just looks like betrayal. Canada's silent strength. While Trump shouts, Carney builds. Canada's federal and provincial governments are offering targeted subsidies to stabilize steel-dependent industries. They've streamlined rail and port infrastructure to speed exports. They've partnered with South Korea and the EU on clean steel initiatives, making Canadian exports not just cheaper, but greener. And crucially, they've done it all without political chaos. Canada's message to the world? We are open for business, and we honor our agreements. It's not flashy, it's not combative, but it's working. Trump's trade war was never about steel. It was about pride, about projecting strength, even if it meant bleeding from the inside. But the illusion is breaking. Ford is gone. Small factories are shuttering. Canada is thriving. And the U.S., the once undisputed industrial king of North America, is watching its throne drift northward. This isn't just about tariffs. It's about leadership, about whether a nation chooses fear and fury or patience and planning. Canada chose wisely. Trump chose chaos. And now, as Detroit shudders and Ontario rises, the legacy of those choices will echo far beyond 2025. No slogans, no walls, just results. For decades, the promise of the American Rust Belt was revival. Every election cycle, presidential candidates from both parties paraded through Youngstown, Dayton, Milwaukee, and Flint, promising to bring back manufacturing and restore American steel. But in 2025, after years of policy whiplash, that dream is falling apart. Not because of globalism, but because of self-inflicted wounds. The Trump administration's protectionist experiment was supposed to be a lifeline. Instead, it became a noose. The 35% steel tariffs, designed to punish foreign producers, wound up punishing American businesses first. With raw input costs soaring and access to affordable Canadian steel blocked, manufacturers began bleeding money, workers, and credibility. Factories that once hummed with the sound of welders and hydraulic presses now echo with silence. Plants in Illinois are idle. Tooling shops in Pennsylvania sit on expired orders. Industrial parks in Michigan have been reduced to ghost towns. The protectionist gamble didn't rebuild the industry. It scorched the earth beneath it. Canada steps up while the U.S. steps back. While Washington alienated allies and destabilized its domestic industries, Ottawa took a radically different approach. Rather than mirroring the U.S.'s erratic terror strategy, Canada pursued quiet strength and long-term policy development. The Canadian government launched Project Core, a multi-billion-dollar investment initiative focused on reshoring critical steel infrastructure, investing in green metallurgy, and creating strategic alliances with Asian and European buyers. Not only did this program protect Canadian mills, it attracted global interest. South Korean automotive giants and German EV battery suppliers now see Canadian steel as more reliable, more ethical, and, due to tariff avoidance, more affordable than American steel. These decisions aren't ideological. They're practical. In a world where stability matters, Canada offers calm while America delivers chaos. The rise of the Pan-Canadian Industrial Corridor. One of the most ambitious parts of Canada's industrial response is a Pan-Canadian Industrial Corridor, a logistics and infrastructure network that connects major steel producers, auto assembly plants, rail terminals, and ports across 6 provinces. Stretching from Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario through the prairies and down to Vancouver and Prince Rupert, this corridor allows Canadian manufacturers to bypass U.S. bottlenecks entirely. What was once a tri-nation supply chain is now being redrawn as a Canada-centric industrial ecosystem, with new trade lanes heading west to Asia and east to Europe, while bypassing Detroit and Chicago entirely. This system isn't just efficient, it's resilient. And for global investors and buyers looking to de-risk supply chains, it's become a better bet than anything south of the 49th parallel. Ford was just the first domino. Ford's exit from U.S. assembly was a symbolic earthquake, but the aftershocks are just beginning. Since Ford's move, whispers have emerged from Magna International, Linamar, and other major Tier 1 suppliers that more production lines will be shifted north of the border if tariff volatility continues. Even American companies like Tesla have begun exploratory talks to build a second Canadian Gigafactory near Kingston, citing Canada's predictable regulatory environment and stable access to raw materials. The message is clear. Canada is the new base of North American industry, and it didn't require tariffs or bluster to make it happen. It required consistency, trust, and the willingness to lead while others flailed. U.S. unions caught in the crossfire. Perhaps the most tragic element of this entire saga is how U.S. labor unions, those who were promised protection and prosperity, have ended up casualties in a war they didn't start. Steelworkers in Pittsburgh, auto workers in Toledo, and machinists in Fort Wayne have watched helplessly as their employers slash benefits, reduce shifts, and quietly move operations north. The United Steelworkers Union, once an enthusiastic supporter of Trump's promises, is now facing declining membership and diminishing political influence. In a press release, a union leader said, "We didn't want a trade war. We wanted smart trade. What we got was policy written in tweets and factories written off the map. Brazil, India, and the new global order. While North America squabbles with itself, other players are eating its lunch. Brazil has quadrupled its steel exports to the Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia. India, benefiting from lower energy costs and government-backed subsidies, is now exporting over 500,000 tons of steel monthly to European carmakers once reliant on U.S. sources. China, of course, looms large in the background, quietly ramping up its own production after a brief pandemic-related lull. With access to rare earths, vertical integration, and expanding belt and road infrastructure, they're positioning themselves to control every stage of the global industrial value chain. In this environment, Canada has made the pivot. The U.S. has not. And now, Washington is discovering that industrial dominance is not a birthright. It's a responsibility. The fallout in the White House. Within the Trump administration, the panic is palpable. Behind closed doors, cabinet members are clashing over whether to ease tariffs or double down. Treasury officials warn of declining GDP forecasts and investor retreat. Political advisors fear an electoral backlash in swing states now suffering economic loss. But Trump, true to form, isn't backing down. He's blamed Canada for stealing American jobs, accused Ford of betraying his country, and threatened retaliation against any company that shifts operations abroad. This rhetoric plays well to a shrinking base. But to business leaders, global investors, and struggling workers, it's just noise. The damage is done. The strategy has failed. And the world has moved on. This isn't just a story about tariffs. It's a story about two nations, two visions, and two very different futures. The United States, under Trump, chose confrontation over collaboration. It built walls, real and economic, and expected the world to comply. It relied on fear instead of foresight. Canada, under steady leadership, chose investment, diversification, and discipline. It didn't flinch under pressure. It didn't lash out. It built. And in doing so, rewrote the rules of North American manufacturing. As steel plants close in Indiana and new ones open in Saskatchewan, as logistics hubs in Ohio wither, and Vancouver's port expands to record capacity, as U.S. workers search for answers and Canadian workers build a future, the truth becomes undeniable. Canada won the trade war by refusing to fight it on Trump's terms. And now, the industrial heart of the continent is beating to a new rhythm, one that no longer waits for Washington to lead. Something remarkable is happening north of the border. Canadian steel is booming, not in defiance, but through deliberate, values-driven strategy. Mark Carney and his team didn't resort to knee-jerk nationalism or slapdash subsidies. They took a different route, a smarter route, one that's now becoming the envy of the global industrial world. Under the One Canadian Economy initiative, Carney's government poured targeted investments into critical infrastructure, modernizing blast furnaces in Hamilton, automating steel rolling mills in Sault Ste. Marie, and expanding the port of Prince Rupert to handle a flood of exports to Asia. This wasn't just economic policy. It was a complete transformation of Canada's industrial ecosystem. And it worked. Steel production is up. Export contracts with Japan, Germany, and Indonesia are locked in. And workers, once facing layoffs, are now being retrained in advanced metallurgy and green energy integration. Canada didn't just protect its steel industry. It gave it a future. The green edge. Why the world is buying Canadian. There's another reason Canada's steel is flying off docks while American shipments sit in limbo: climate policy. While Trump mocked climate science and dismantled environmental regulations, Canada invested in the green future of industry. Federal grants help steelmakers reduce emissions by installing carbon capture systems and adopting hydrogen-based smelting. This means Canadian steel now qualifies under the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBM, while American steel does not. The result? European automakers are switching contracts. Asian tech firms are rerouting supply chains. Canadian steel is cleaner, cheaper in net carbon costs, and more reliable in trade compliance. Trump's America may shout America first, but the market is shouting back, we'll take Canadian. America's talent drain begins. It's not just steel, aluminum, and auto manufacturing fleeing across the 49th. It's people. U.S. engineers, metallurgists, and supply chain specialists are quietly applying for Canadian work visas. Why? Because they're tired of chaos. Because they want to work in industries that have a future. And because their skills are in high demand in a country that's building instead of burning. This silent exodus of talent is rarely discussed in mainstream economic reports, but it's real and it's growing. It's not just about dollars anymore. It's about where people see stability, purpose, and pride in the work they do. Canada is offering all three. The U.S., under Trump's erratic policies, is offering none. Trump's allies turn on him. The political consequences are just as explosive as the economic fallout. Republican governors in states like Michigan and Ohio, once firm allies of Trump's industrial strategy, are beginning to distance themselves. When Ford pulled out of the U.S. Assembly line deal, Ohio's governor publicly pleaded for a federal policy reversal. We were promised jobs. We got tariffs and layoffs, he said. Even Republican senators are questioning the logic of alienating a top ally like Canada. In private, U.S. Chamber of Commerce executives are circulating memos warning that continued tariffs on Canadian imports could trigger a regional recession in the Great Lakes Industrial Corridor. But none of that seems to register in the West Wing. Trump is doubling down. And Canada? It's simply moving forward, undaunted and focused. Strategic patience, Carney's masterstroke. While Trump thrives on media spectacle, Carney has proven the power of silence. He hasn't bombarded Twitter with threats. He hasn't held rallies to scream about betrayal. He hasn't performed rage-fueled monologues from behind a podium. Instead, he's governed patiently, intelligently, steadily. His refusal to sign a bad trade deal, even under immense pressure, has become a model for democratic resilience. His speeches are full of calm resolve. Canada will not trade its dignity for access. We will not submit to coercion. We will compete with fairness and strength. In a world awash with strongmen and slogan politics, Carney's quiet defiance has become a global statement of values. It's why he's now viewed not just as a national leader, but a statesman. The new map of North American trade, the economic landscape of North America, is no longer centered on Washington. The new axis runs from Toronto to Vancouver, with stops in Montreal, Calgary, and Halifax, all hubs of innovation, clean energy, and global trade outreach. U.S. trade dependence on Canada is now more fragile than ever, and Canada's future? Diversified, resilient, and far more independent than at any point in the last 50 years. Exports to India have doubled. Direct foreign investment from the EU is surging. Joint steel and EV battery projects with South Korea are breaking ground in Alberta and Manitoba. This isn't fantasy. It's happening now in real time. And it's sending a message to every mid-sized nation in the world. You don't have to play by a superpower script to succeed. Consumers are voting with their wallets. Let's not forget how this all lands with everyday people. Consumers, workers, families. American consumers are feeling the sting of Trump's steel tariffs at every turn. Cars are more expensive. Appliances cost more. New construction has slowed because rebar and I-beam costs are through the roof. Meanwhile, Canadian consumers, though not immune to global inflation, are seeing more investment in public works, better infrastructure, and stronger domestic job creation. Even tourism is shifting. With anti-Canadian rhetoric soaring in the U.S., Canadians are canceling cross-border trips, spending at home, or exploring Europe instead. What began as a trade dispute has become a lifestyle shift, a warning for the future. The U.S. is facing not just a temporary dip in trade, it's confronting a foundational crisis in how it sees itself in the world. Does it want to be an angry, isolated fortress, forever imposing tariffs and accusing allies of betrayal? Or can it return to being a country that builds alliances, nurtures industries, and leads by trust, not threats? Right now, Trump is making that decision for everyone. But if the U.S. fails to pivot, the consequences will be generational. Canada's message to the world: through all the noise and volatility, Canada has remained consistent. It's not just defending its economy, it's defending an idea that in a world where nations grow increasingly adversarial, there is still strength in cooperation, dignity in discipline, and power in principle. Carney's government may not win headlines with every move, but behind the scenes, it's setting the standard for 21st century governance in a fractured global order. The steel story is just one chapter, but it encapsulates a larger truth. Canada is no longer the junior partner waiting for the U.S. to lead. It's a peer, and in many ways, it's now the example others want to follow. Trump's steel tariffs were supposed to make America strong again. Instead, they exposed fragility. They weakened allies. They drove away investment. And they handed the future of North American industry to the very country Trump tried to squeeze. Mark Carney stood firm. Canada stood tall. And the world took notice. No deal is better than a bad deal. And Canada just proved why.